Alright, welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to go over my process for mixing and mastering this song. And there are a lot of stems to this song. I just got done essentially mixing it, remixing it, because the first time I did it was a long time ago and I was doing a lot of things that were very unnecessary. And I've learned over time that a lot of the things that I used to do were kind of a waste of time. So I've got all of my melodies going to one place. And then I have my 808s and sub basses, which in this case I think are just two different 808s playing, going to one place. I've got my kick. I've got all of my main snare clap sounds. I have got a rim layered with a snare clap actually, and this rim has a little bit of reverb on it. That wasn't in the original. I actually did that just now as I was mixing it, because that's something I've been doing recently, is putting just a little bit of reverb on one of the layers of a main snare clap sound and just kind of tweaking the decay time until it, sounds right. And I tend to mix my kick and main snare clap sound to be as loud as each other, and I tend to push them to be as loud as possible. So I push them all the way up to 0 decibels as a kick. So you can see the kick. It's going all the way up to 0. And it's actually not hitting quite as hard as I would want it to, so I'm going to use my wave shaper to add a little bit of distortion, push it up a little bit. Add a little bit of volume on the limiter. Alright, so as I said, my kick and my main snare clap sound are going up to 0 decibels. And then I tend to make my secondary snare claps a little bit quieter than those. So I think the max volume I want those hitting is like -3 decibels if your main snare clap is getting up to 0. So let's get a little bit louder because I am using a compressor here. I'm going to turn them down a little bit more. I want my secondary snare clap sounds and rims and that sort of thing to be about half to 3/4 as loud as my main snare clap sound. And it's not like a hard, fast rule or anything, and I usually just kind of go by ear more so than anything else, but something to keep in mind. By the way, everything I'm saying is very genre specific. It's also song specific. So in certain songs you might mix things slightly differently. Certain genres you would certainly mix things differently. So keep that in mind as well. And this is something else I don't do anymore. I used to send all of my hats to one place and then process them all together and then send those to my drums. I don't do that anymore. That's a little bit extra. Don't say that, I want my main hats to be loud enough and present enough so that they can be heard, but I don't want them to be so loud that they're overpowering everything else that might have a little bit of high end in it that you want to shine through just a little bit. So in this case, it's actually, my hats are pretty quiet. They're at -15 decibels. Usually I push them up closer to like -9. But in this case, again, it's -15, so it's really song dependent and, again, genre dependent on how loud certain things are going to be. One thing that I do consistently is I take my main hats and I merge them about 50%. In this case, it was 52. It's close enough. I do that with all of my main sounds, actually. I have not done that in this case on my main snare clap sound, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to merge this a little bit more. Let's go 75%. You'll notice my kick, and I might have forgotten to mention this, my kick is completely in mono. It's completely merged. I just made my main snare clap 75% merged, so it's not quite as merged, but it's pretty close. And you'll notice that I separated my spiked rim layer on the main snare clap sound, and that's just to kind of give it a little bit more depth. So part of the sound is going to be a bit more mono, part of it's going to be a bit more separated. My non-main sounds, I tend to separate them to do what I was just describing, to kind of give more in the way of stereo separation. And when it comes to my hats, like I mentioned, I'm merging my main hats about 50%, and then all my non-main hat sounds I tend to separate. And sometimes something else I like to do is add reverb to some of them, and in this case I might actually do that. Reverb to it and see if we can't get it to kind of take up a slightly different space than that main hat. Because right now they're both kind of taking up that same dimension. My kick. So all my drums are all being sent to one place. So my kick, all of my snare clap sounds, and then all my hats are all going to my drum bus. I kind of already do that in a way. I just kind of replaced these two distortion plugins with the Fruity Wave Shaper, so it's pretty similar to what I do now. Anyway, something I did do this time, which I didn't used to do, is parallel compression. So I'm sending the signal to two different places. On the first place, it's being overcompressed, and in the second place, it's just a normal signal. And I'm mixing a little bit of this overcompressed signal in with the normal signal, and it's coming out here. See, I like to have a mixture of things that are separated, things that are in mono. I like to have things that are washed out, things that are dry. I do the same thing with my melodies. I didn't really go over that with the melodies quite as much, but with this particular melody, there's a lot of low end, so I separated it. And I tend to do that with certain melodies that have more low end. I tend to separate them a little bit more. And aside from the tags, that's pretty much it. And then I don't do this anymore. In this case, I sent everything to one place, and then I had a pre-master chain that I used to use, but I don't do any of that anymore because that was using way too much CPU and it was just way more effort than it was worth. Now I do way less and I get the exact same, if not a better sound. So in this case, everything's being sent to one place, not really for any reason. I just used to do that. So this is just being sent to the master, and currently on the master I just have a soft clipper. Here in just a moment we'll start actually mastering the track, which is also very different than how I used to do it. And the way that I like to mix them is my main vocal chain, I like to kind of have topping off at, and again, this changes song to song, changes from genre to genre. In this case, let's look and see, going up to -3 decibels, a little bit above. All the main vocals are being sent to the main vocal chain, and then you'll see here I've got this separated off. All of my ad-libs are being sent to the ad-libs thing, the ad-libs chain, which has some other effects. And you'll notice with my ad-libs I like to separate them almost entirely. In this case it was at 95%, 98 is also fine. I almost entirely separate out the ad-libs. I want them to be almost all the way out on the sides. And in fact, to help more with that, I've got a spreader which is spreading the signal out and separating it even more so. I am also, on the ad-libs, kind of doing like a radio effect, so I'm tucking in the highs and the lows. So I'm cutting the highs, cutting the lows, and kind of boosting what's in between a little bit. And so if we go to just the ad-libs, okay, so it's got kind of a radio-y effect. It's also very much on the sides. Almost none of the signal is in the middle. I'm adding a lot of fruity flanges to it, and I'm also mixing back some of the signals, so it's not entirely a wet signal. Some of the signal is dry and unchanged here. And I kind of do that with most of my effects. Different delays with, I think, 2 different settings on the timings. Have a reverb and a limiter, which is adding some saturation as well. Earlier, all the main sounds and then all of the ad-libs as well are all being processed, and I might change that a little bit later so that my ad-libs aren't being processed by all this again, but anyway, currently that's how I'm doing it. All of my vocals are being processed on my vocal chain, which is this. So the first thing in my vocal chain is a vocal writer, which the way that works is it kind of takes all of the vocals and makes sure that they're around the same volume coming in so that everything sounds consistent going into the compressor and everything else that all the vocals are about to go into. Writer, I have an EQ where I'm kind of rolling off the low lows, cutting the high highs, and that's more or less it. Sometimes I will use this to kind of boost a little bit of, you know, the presence, or I'll use it to cut something that I don't like, but in this case I didn't do anything with it. I've got the EQ, then I have a compressor which has the following settings. It's got a 3:1 ratio. The threshold is 10 decibels down. I've got a very fast attack, a release that is at 69 currently, soft knee, and the gain is being pushed up by about 4.3 decibels. Okay, I have a chain of de-essers, which In the future, I might change, and sometimes I will deactivate one or several of these if they aren't functioning the way that, well, I need them to. And they are set up in different ranges. So this is 4.5 to 5.5 kilohertz. This is 5.5 to 7.5 kilohertz, and then this is 7.5 to 10 kilohertz. So those are the ranges where sibilance, and if you don't know what sibilance is, it's that kind of sound, that sibilancy sound. That's what sibilance is. So a de-esser kind of helps to reduce that if there's too much of that going on. And if now that I've mentioned sibilance, you're probably paying more attention to the sibilance in my voice. And you might even be noticing I have a ton of sibilance in my voice naturally, which is annoying once you start to notice it, because I tend to whistle through my teeth as I talk. And anyway, it's annoying, but I've got 3 different de-essers, as I said, with that each act the same, but in 3 different ranges. So let's look at this one. So this one is 4.5 to 5.5 kilohertz. You can see it's only acting when those sibilancy sounds are coming through. And in fact, because it's only working, I actually want it to work a little bit more so.
Take another sip, breathe another wisp, take another hit. Lonely on the grind, each to their own mind. Tell me.
Let's look at the 5.5 to 7.5 range and see how it's going.
Bottle to your lips, take another sip, breathe another wisp, take another hit. Lonely on the grind, each to their own mind. Tell me that you're blind when I fail to hide.
Okay, this is getting some non-sibilancy sounds, so I'm gonna back. This was kind of aggressive. I'm gonna back it off a little bit here. And sometimes, like I said before, if one of these basically isn't doing anything, no matter how I adjust the settings, I'll just deactivate it because it's not doing what I need it to for one reason or another. So let's go to the next thing in the chain. So after my de-esser, I've got pitcher, which is essentially just a free version of autotune. And I have it set at a very mild, like almost unnoticeable setting, very human-like setting for most of the song. The exception, as you can probably hear, is the hook when I'm doing this part. And I've got my voice pitched down very low, but I have a whole lot of auto-tune on it. So here's what it sounds like. You can see I have the pitch, the retune speed, automated so that at this point, just when the hook comes in, the retune speed turns up to very, very fast. So you can see over here it's very low, very mild, and then as the hook comes in,
go fucking lay in it.
Turns up. And the reason I do that is because I have all the vocals going through the same chain. If you had a different chain for each set of vocals, you probably wouldn't need to do that, but at the same time, by doing it this way, I'm saving a bunch of CPU because I'm not reusing a bunch of the same, processes that I would have to reuse. So dry knob is at 100%. And I have this mixed almost entirely out. It's currently at 11%. There's another EQ where I do cutting of the lows and the high highs, and then I also do like slight adjustments as well. And then after this EQ, I have a limiter, which is just setting a ceiling at 0 decibels. I am adding a slight amount of saturation at the very top, just to the very loudest stuff that's coming through. And then I'm pushing the gain up by 2.7 decibels. So I'm just kind of pushing it up into this limiter just a little bit. Okay, and I think I mentioned this earlier, but my main vocals on this song are up to -3 decibels. And then my ad-libs on this song are actually all the way up to -6 decibels. That's actually a little bit louder than I normally do with ad-libs. With ad-libs, I tend to go closer to -9 or -12, depending on the song. In this case, like I said, I pushed them a little bit louder just because I wanted them a little bit louder in this particular song. Okay, so that is it for mixing the vocals. Something you might notice is my vocals are side-chained all the way over here to the melodies. So all of the melodies have all these processes going on, and I deleted quite a few things that were on here because when I opened it up, I was like, what was I doing? Because obviously I'm learning as I'm going, and over time I'm learning that some things, well, a lot of things I used to do are kind of a waste of time or whatever the case. So I deleted quite a few of them. In fact, this one I'm not using, so I'm going to delete that. And one of the things in this chain that I do still currently use is a limiter. And you'll notice I have the vocals, the main vocals, sidechained to the main melody. And I have it set up so that as the vocals come in, the main vocals come in, well actually, in this case, all the vocals, any vocals that come in, will duck down just the melody a little bit. So I have the ratio currently set to 3.1 to 1. So 3 to 1. I don't always have it set to be 3 to 1. Sometimes I have it set to be like 1.5 to 1 or 2 to 1, something like that. It, again, depends on the song. And the threshold also depends. I like to have the threshold set so that any time a vocal comes through, it's pulling the volume down of the melody. I don't want some other things that I like to sidechain. The kick. I like to sidechain the kick to the 808. Let me start over. I've both my 808s going to one place, and the kick is being sidechained to both the output, like where everything for the 808s is going, but it's also being sidechained to one of the initial inputs for the 808s, if that makes sense. Anyway, normally I only sidechain the kick to the the main outputs for all the 808s, just like this.
No fence around the
So you can see as the kick comes in, the 808 ducks down right in the beginning, just like that. What are these settings? Hang on, I'm sorry. Let me... So I'm going to take my main snare clap and sidechain it to one of my 808s. Sometimes I would do it to both. In this case, I'm going to do it to the one that's playing the majority of the time. So this one.
No fence around the dog.
What are these settings? I don't know what I used to do. Okay, let's set the ratio to 3 to 1. Let's start there and just see how it sounds. Let's make this above 1. Okay.
No fence around the dog. No fence around the doghouse. Go fucking lay
See what I mean? It's like you're not gonna really notice if a little bit of sound gets ducked down like halfway through the 808, or at least if you're subtle about it. In fact, I might make it a little bit more subtle. Let's make it 2 to 1.
No fence around the dog.